too.
I got the turbo off, I got the headers off and the up pipe, so now I'm just loosening things to get this intake manifold off. So I have a lot of it loosened. I just need to go around and unclip things and then I'll pull it off. I was able to remove the intake manifold from the block. Got the timing cover off and now I'm draining the oil to remove the drain pan. I got the drain pan off. I'm done for today. Tomorrow we're going to pull the valve cover and the heads. And this is where all the stuff is residing for the moment. Both of the heads came off. The pistons are in good condition. So I'll either get these resurfaced or look for a new pair. I need to go to the shop and determine if these cracks are okay or not. Here is the short block and this is the rest of everything. Yesterday I pressure washed this so it's a lot cleaner. I got a few packages today. This one is the ancillary hoses for the coolant and PCV. These can also be used for, I guess, vacuum lines. I'm gonna see. I know where these go. I looked at the Mishimoto video, so I have an idea of where to place them, and then I'm gonna see which ones I can replace with those. I also got this valve spring compressor, so I can take the valves out and check that they're all seated properly and cleaned. I got this harmonic balancer, and then got some camshaft seals and the rest of my timing covers. I also got these high pressure fuel lines. They go right there and then there's two underneath there. Here are the silicone hoses. I took them all out. And then these are the clamps that they came with. People said that these are really cheap. I'll try them on for a little bit and if they start to break, I'll replace them. I got another round of parts. So we have the head gasket, that's just one side from Rock Auto. I'm waiting for another box of parts. These are the PVC hoses and some coolant hoses and some other gaskets. This side right here alone was 150 bucks, all OEM parts. And then we have the new water pump over there. We have the OEM timing belt tensioner, some other like the turbo gaskets, the exhausts. We have the alternator belt, more exhaust gasket stuff, the turbo bolts. We also have the turbo oil line. So I'm waiting for another package from Rock Auto and spark plugs and some other stuff. Here's another round of parts. We got the valve cover gasket. We have these intake manifold gaskets. This just like miscellaneous exhaust gaskets. The other head gasket, the one for the bottom. These are coolant lines for the bottom of the engine where the oil pump goes, and then we have all these bearings for the timing belt. I put blue tape on the hoses that I need to replace, and this hose is a lot longer and it also doesn't bend the same way. This hose is definitely a lot longer and needs to be trimmed. I took off this old fuel hose and I'm gonna put the new one in. The old hoses that used to be right here were a little difficult to remove, so I had to loosen this and I had to loosen this, and then I ended up just cutting the hose to pull it off. This isn't the cleanest, but I got the hoses on. They were a little longer. I have the old ones, so if they're too long I'm gonna cut them to length. So that's that. I had some difficulty getting these fuel hoses in right there, so I took the turbo intake out, and I'll just finish that tomorrow because it's getting late. That's why it's hanging out there. And then there's all these PCV hoses. The kit that came with 3 different diameter hoses, and I just used those and cut them to length. So the other ones that were on here were very brittle and were cracking. So that's all that mess right there. And I still can't figure out how to get this one to fit. As you guys can see, the diameter is a lot smaller, so I cannot fit this over here. I would say that all of the PVC hoses are cracked, like the one on the left. When I took it off, it was cracking. You can see how hard it is to press versus the new one. It's a lot more flexible. I just want to replace them because some of them might be cracked and I don't want them to leak. I took off the old oil pump seal and I'm going to gently tap this one on. Also clean the surface right here, so I'll put some RTV sealant and then put this back in. I'm replacing these 3 lower coolant hoses for the oil cooler. If you look at this, it's all worn out. I'm going to replace these O-rings as well. I cut off this old fuel hose and I'm putting the new one on right now. Got the old water pump out. There's some silicone left over here that the previous owner used, so I used the razor blade to clean it off. And coming over here, this is the new water pump and it's made in Japan. And this is the old one right here. This is also the new thermostat. The water pump kit came with this gasket, which appears to be metal. People recommended that you get the OEM one, which I did get. I don't see much of a difference, but I'm going to stick with OEM. I got the spring compressor tool on, so I'm just tightening it and it pushes the spring down. Then I'm going to remove those retainer clips with the magnet, and then the valve should come off. I got the 2 retainer clips out. I'm going to back this out. This is the valve that I was concerned about because when I put water in this intake port, it was leaking. It was the only one that was leaking water. I pulled this out already, and then I used just like a wire brush for Dremel. I just used this to gently rub around the outside and this, just to see if there's like carbon buildup that's creating a gap that's causing it to leak. The valve seems pretty straight to me, so I don't think there's any damage to that. Getting those guides back in was a little difficult. I used the tip of a Phillips head screwdriver because it was magnetic and I was able to get that in. Just took some fiddling around. Then I just slowly loosened the tension on that and got it going. I filled this with water. It's not a very scientific test, but it'll tell you if there's leaks. Seems to be doing a lot better. The one right here was leaking water before. I found it easier just to drop these retainer clips, and then when you loosen it, they just seat in like that. These exhaust valves are a lot dirtier. Same right here, so I'll probably just put these back in and then soak them. This is the last valve that I'm checking, and they're all straight. I got the heads in a garbage bag. I'm going to put that in my car so I can bring it to a resurfacing shop. Today is January 16th, 2020, and I'm at Lynn Auto Machine in Redwood City. Yesterday I dropped off my heads, so now I'm going to pick them up. Got the new head gasket on. I have the bolts in. They have a layer of engine oil on the threads and also on the washer. I'm following this procedure right here. It says to use a new cylinder head, which I'm using. Then it says to apply a coat of engine oil to washers and bolt threads. Then I'm going to follow this tightening procedure. I'm following this pattern right here, so A, B, C, D, E, F. I torqued them down to 22 foot-pounds, then I did the entire pattern again to 51. So now I have to back all the bolts off by 180 degrees, and then I have to do that again. I have this device, so essentially tells you what your starting point is. This thing kind of just holds this dial gauge in place. When you're turning this dial moves around so you can keep track of how many degrees it was turned. Next, I torqued everything to 25 foot-pounds. Next, I torqued A and B to 25 foot-pounds. Next, I'm tightening C, D, E, and F to 11 foot-pounds. Then I tightened the bolts around 85 degrees, then I did that again. Going to start on the other side. See that it broke from doing this, so I bought a new one. This is a impact socket. I have this breaker bar, and then I added an extension to it, and I just like put all my weight on it, and I was finally able to snap this off. So I got to do this for 2 other ones, and then I'm going to put these camshafts back on. I also soaked the ends of the camshafts in PB Blaster, some penetration catalyst, so it's been sitting there for a day, hoping that it would loosen the threads on the bolts. I got the camshafts aligned like this picture, so the nubs are on the bottom. On the left side it's around 7 o'clock, on the right side it's around like 2 o'clock. It says to use 3-bond 1215 or equivalent. Equivalent is this Permatex Ultra Gray. I'm just going to apply it where it says to apply it here. I torqued the nuts down to 14.5 foot-pounds, starting with A, B, C, D, E, F, and then I did it for the same below. It says to verify that it rotates slightly at base circle, which it does. I have a new pack of oil seals. These are the old ones. I lightly greased inside, and I'm going to put them on. I don't have the special tool to put in the oil seal, so what I did was I used the old seals, and then I used this 36-inch socket, and then I just gently tapped it from the back, and I got it to seat in. I was torquing this down, and it decided to snap on me, so I got to use a screw extractor to get that out. I probably spent half an hour drilling into this using this cold bolt bit, and finally got it out. So I'm using a screw extractor, and it's finally coming out. I'm going to use these flange bolts. They're M6 1.0mm by 40mm. They're the exact same length as the stock ones. These are the old idlers, and I just want to show you this one right here. This is the newer model. I had to buy a longer bolt, so this one was from here. If I put it in here, it's not long enough, so I had to buy this new bolt that's a lot longer. And then got these on. Got to put this one back on. .9 foot-pounds. This is a bit overkill, but my 3/4 inch torque wrench is not working. Now I'm going to put these sprockets in. I have two of the back timing covers on. I have the sprockets on loosely. I'm waiting for a special tool to tighten those. I have the timing belt idlers on. This cam sprocket tool came, and what it does is it holds this in place while you tighten the bolt so it fits on this pattern and also lines up with the ones here. I think also one orientation like that, and then the same thing over there as well. So I'm going to tighten these bolts up to around 73 foot-pounds. It's hard to record while tightening this, so I'll just show you guys what it is like afterwards. I bought the OEM timing belt and I'm going to install it now. I have all of the sprockets aligned except for this one, so I just want to show you guys. We want to have this mark line up with the one up here. It's a little off, I need to turn it, but essentially you want to have that straight up. There's lines on the timing belt to indicate where they need to be, so this one goes here, and then we're following this pattern right here going in alphabetical order, so A, B, C, D, E. This would be A going here, we would have this being B, and then C, and then D, E. But I just want to show you guys the marks. So there's that mark that goes here. We have this mark up here that lines up with the top of the timing belt cover right there, and then this double mark lines up with the one below, which I need to turn. There's another mark here that needs to line up with this timing belt cover right here, and then on this side we have the mark lining up with the one up there, and then the double marks that line up with each other, and the one that lines up with the timing cover right there as well. So these I was able to rotate without a tool. This one, just because of the valve positioning, I need to use this tool to rotate it so that these double marks line up and this lines up there, and then I'll put the belt on and then continue the process. I left the valve cover off because I want to see where the valves are in relation to everything. It helps me to understand it better. I also forgot to mention, when rotating these sprockets, they need to go in a certain direction. The top one needs to go clockwise, the bottom one goes counterclockwise, as depicted in this figure right there, the one on the bottom. So you would rotate the top one that way, and you shouldn't do it the way that's shown up here, because the valves will hit and get bent. I actually tightened all of the pulleys before installing the belt. I watched videos where they kept it loose and then you tighten them after you put the belt on. I guess you could do it either way. It was a little more difficult trying to push the belt over here, but there was enough slack. I have not pulled the tensioner pin yet. I just want to walk through the marks again to make sure I have everything in place. So these three are lined up. The sprocket, so we have this mark, we have the one on the belt, then we have the one on the oil pump. Those are lined up. We can continue traveling down. That has not been pulled yet. This has been tightened. These two have been tightened. Going up here, they're lining up. Going down, these marks line up. Going here, this mark lines up with the belt, which lines up with the cover. This is probably better with the flash on. So sprocket lines up with the belt, which lines up with the cover. Moving down, keep going. This is over the water pump. Still going. Then over here, we have the marks that line up right there and on the belt. And then these two that line up, and then the ones up there. Continuing back, we get back here again. Everything looks good, so I'm going to pull this pin, and there it is. I have a breaker bar on, and I want to make sure that these line up when I spin this around. So let's do a few revolutions. So going back to the top, right there, they are lining up. The ones over there are lining up for the most part too. Let's try that again. So 2 rotations, coming up to it right about there, and those do line up, and these do line up, so I think we're good. I'm test fitting the radiator. It looks like the silicone piece that came with the eBay kit works. It might need to be trimmed depending how far this sits from the engine inside the car, but this other piece for the top is just too long. This is a GC8 radiator, and I bought some hoses intending to swap it because some of these brackets were broken on mine. So I have this and it seems to be working. I might need to trim it a little shorter later though. We have the new valve cover gaskets on. We replace these pieces right here, and then we gotta install these. There's already sealant that I put in, so these go in right here, and then I also put some sealant right there per the factory manual. I got this side on. When I was loosening this, I dropped one of the screws in here, so I had to pull this shield off and also the oil pickup. So I got the screw out, gonna put this back on and then put some sealant and put the oil pan on. Got the oil pan on and also the dipstick. Putting the new intake manifold gaskets on. I'm gonna install the new spark plugs. Finish installing the intake manifold. There's a new gasket, put in the spark plugs, and then started on the back of the turbo. The tabs holding the spark plug coil broke when I pushed that in to remove it. It broke on both of these, that's why they're zip tied right now, so I bought these replacement ones. I'll be swapping the pins with these replacement ones right now. I got the turbo in, I replaced these bolts and nuts, so that's replaced. I have this attached right here, and the reason why there's a zip tie there and electrical tape is because there was a rip. I am planning to use this stock one temporarily to pass smog and to pass the bar inspection. I'm planning on replacing that with an aftermarket one, but if I put the new one on, then it won't pass the visual inspection, so I'm gonna try to get away with this. Have this connected right there, and then if we go down here, we have this new hose right here. I replaced both of these washers. The same thing over here. This is a new hose, and we have this gasket on for the downpipe, and then we also have it for the uppipe. This is a side-by-side of the two exhausts. The GC8 is on the left and the WRX is on the right. I'll just walk you down. There's 2 tips for the WRX. These mounting locations appear to be identical. Then as we move forward, these do not line up. These seem okay. These seem to line up as well. And then getting up here, and then we have the differences right there. And here are the new gaskets. The old gasket wasn't in that bad of a condition. It came out in one piece. I remember when I took it off on the GC8 before, it just fell apart. But since I have the new one, I'm going to put it on. This appears to be in the way of the downpipe, so I'll loosen that and remove it. I have the flywheel and the clutch for the GC8 that's going on the WRX engine. I made this flywheel holder out of a conduit strap. So I just drilled some holes to make it bigger to fit those bolts in. I pried off the old rear main seal. I'm going to put the new one on. The new main seal is in. Got the bearing in. I just used the 22mm socket and a mallet, and I just gently tapped it in. The old flywheel is on the right, and the new one is on the left. I don't know if this is a return, but there's just 3 bolts that were kind of loose out here, but then it comes with another pack of 5 genuine Subaru bolts, so I'm not really complaining. I read somewhere that you're supposed to put red Loctite. I just put a little on just to hold, because I don't want these bolts loosening up on me, so I'm just gonna put that in. Hopefully it won't be too hard when I have to replace this later on. This is the torque spec and the torque pattern. Here's the new clutch and the pressure plate. I used brake cleaner to clean the flywheel before I put that disc on, so gotta do the same for this pressure plate. Just wipe it down. There's 2 grooves that need to line up, the one right there and then the one right there. So I have 6 bolts on, and I'm gonna torque it down to 11.6 foot-pounds. Here are the 2 Crossmember side by side. The top is WRX. Notice that there is a dip right there. So what some people do is they notch a hole here, but I'm gonna try to put that one on and see if I can use the existing control arms and see how that goes. I heard that I might have to put some washers where the bushings go. So just gonna do close up. I also heard that if you reuse this one, not this, you have to loosen it right there and just swap them over because the hoses are different. Right now I'm just gonna check the distances for those tie rods and then make sure that they're the same. I realized that the splines on the WRX steering rack are not the same. I tried attaching it to the steering column, but it wasn't working. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna try to swap the steering racks. So I have the GC8 steering rack with the WRX Crossmember and see if that works. I just spent the past 8 or so hours getting this Crossmember from the WRX in. It actually, I think because it was an accident, it didn't line up properly with these bolts right here. So what I had to do is, here's the old one. So these holes didn't line up, so I couldn't slip it in. Some were like all the way off right there or like right there, and then some just didn't line up, so I had to use a drill, and then I was like drilling into it and test fitting it. Finally got it in. Also, the front sway bar, I had to use, let me just go underneath the car. This front sway bar bracket was damaged during the accident, so I need to find a new one and replace that. These seem to be fitting in okay, and let me just go to the control arm. So here's one of the control arms. This is the one. This is the one from the WRX. I'm thinking about swapping that in. Haven't had time yet, but this bushing right here is a lot thicker than the one from the GC8. You can see that there is a lot of space, so what some people do is they put shims here. They just get like washers to fill up that space. So I think for this side at least, I will replace it with the OEM one, and then this is the one that was bent that I cannot reuse, and this bushing is like messed up too. I think I said this already, but in case I didn't, these splines on, this is the WRX one, these splines do not line up with the steering rack in the GC8, so I had to remove the steering rack from the GC8 from that Crossmember over there and then put it back in here. Alright, so we have some challenges here. We need to line that spline up with the clutch, so that needs to go in smoothly underneath the engine. There's on the bottom of the motor mounts, or there's like one bolt on each side that needs to line in with the holes on the Crossmember. So what I have here is I have a floor jack that's pushing the transmission up. That way, there's also this like metal piece underneath the engine, underneath the flywheel. So I had to have this high enough to clear that so I can slide it through. Then I'm just gonna like rotate the engine so this stuff lines up, and then try to drop it down on the Crossmember. This is pretty difficult. I spent like 20 minutes on this and got it pretty close. Right now I'm just putting these bolts in. That way, like, it's not really biting in the middle. So I'm hoping that maybe by putting these bolts in, it'll line up and then I can just push it in. It was a little disappointing. The WRX Crossmember was in such bad condition. The engine was straight and one of the motor mounts was sticking in there, but the other one was like 3 inches off. So this Crossmember is super bent. I want to finish this pretty quickly, so instead of buying a new Crossmember, I'm going to notch this one. So this is like the indentation that I need to create in here, and what goes there is this up pipe. And in order to not mess with the Crossmember, I cut this heat shield, and I guess you can see here, just using an angle grinder. And this is how much more I would have had to cut or notch there. So I'm trying to get away with as little to retain that structural integrity. This is the hole that I cut. I'm going to use a Dremel to get rid of any sharp edges. So if it's rounded, there's less likely for a stress crack. And then I'm going to clean this up, probably spray paint it so it doesn't... well, I'm going to do a test fit first to make sure that this fits, and then I'll probably spray paint it so it doesn't rust in there. And then these pieces were just kind of hanging, so I figured I'd just break the welds here and then just pull the whole thing off. This is the test fit and it's barely fitting. I just sprayed on some automotive primer to seal the raw metal, and I also did it for some other spots on the Crossmember. Got the engine in. Here's the engine in. Still need to make a lot of connections. So I actually didn't cut enough of this Crossmember. This up pipe is hitting it, so it's a little too high and I can't bolt these together. So what I'm going to do is use a Dremel with a metal cutter and cut some more here, and then hope that this drops down. I cut more of that area. It was a little hard because of the spacing right here to cut at an angle. Doesn't look the best, but it's clear, and now I'm gonna put the new gasket in and tighten this. I need to reuse the GC8 AC compressor because the hole for the hoses is smaller. You can't really see it there, but on this end it's the same. You can see that it's a lot bigger than that one, and yeah, so this one's the smaller one, and when it goes over here it gets smaller too, so I want to retain this piece. That's why I got to reuse the AC compressor from the GC8. This AC hose was also not fitting. It was rubbing against there, so I had to use a heat gun, and then ended up using this bolt from the crane hoist and just putting in there and then just bending it, and that's where I was able to bend it this way. I picked up a new power steering reservoir hose. This is the fuel filter, and then these two hoses are for the heater core. This is the original configuration of the heater core hoses. This one on the top, where my finger is going, used to go to the water pipe from the GC8, and then this one over here would go to the water pump. It looks like it makes sense to have that one connect to the water pipe and then have this one. Just imagine it going underneath there and then connecting to this. Like, it fits perfectly, but because the water pipe is right here, this one on the top needs to connect here, and then this one that used to go to the water pump needs to connect right here on the WRX. I want to show you guys what I was talking about. So that hose that was on the top, if you follow that, it goes to the water pipe right there, and then the other one that was on the bottom, if you follow this one down here, it goes there, there, and down to the water pump. This airbox mount is in the way of the intercooler, so I loosened two 10mm bolts down there, and I'm just going to take it out. I used the new hose right here, and I ended up using the old WRX hose. It seems to be in pretty good condition, and I seemed to fit pretty perfectly. I didn't have to use the new one and chop it up, so it goes under here, and there seems to be enough clearance, and it doesn't interfere with the intercooler. Here are the two throttle cables. The one on the top is the GC8s, and the bottom is the WRXs. Notice how much longer it is for the WRX. To get the old throttle cable from the firewall, I just turned it clockwise and then it popped, and then I was able to pull it out. The other one, the WRX one, actually has like this other kind of bracket. It seemed to just pop right in. It's kind of loose, but I guess when you pull the cable, it just holds this in place, so it's not going to move around too much. I don't know if this is the best method, but it seems to be working. I ended up using the GC8 throttle cable bracket because the WRX one, these notches were pretty far back there. Even at rest, the throttle cable is pulling around here, so the throttle would be open, and that's not good. I picked up a new radiator from Amazon for about 20 bucks. It's usually like 60, but I got it pretty cheap on Amazon Warehouse. The old one, this tab was missing, so I figured I'd just buy one with a tab. Transferred the fans and the reservoir over, and I'm gonna put it back in. This is a new hose that I need to cut right here. I'm underneath the engine, and I need to cut this hose probably right here. I installed the new alternator belt. There's about a 1/4 inch of flex, and then I'm reusing the AC belt. I didn't get my new one yet. I think it's about a 1/4 to 1/2 inch of play right there, which is good. This is not the final setup, but what I have here is this hose going to the radiator, and usually there is a rubber piece that goes on bottom. I was told I need to remove that. I'm gonna see if this works. There's a guy who ran this without the rubber gasket and it worked. Some other people recommend cutting that spring. I'm gonna try doing this first. If it doesn't work, I'll cut the spring. And then this hose right here, this is just a temporary thing, but it needs to go to the reservoir, and I'm missing this gasket here, and on the bottom I'm gonna pull it from the WRX and see if it fits. There's one here. It seems to be working fine. I have the coolant hoses here, and then the one on the bottom right there. So I reinstalled the intake and put this MAF plug back in. Everything should be good. I left this exposed for now just in case I need to trace any wirings. I'm gonna put the intercooler back on and then try starting it up, and if it works, then I'll take it back off and then put the wire loom over it and clean it up. This is the quick and dirty method. Just filling the system up, the coolant system up with water, planning to try running it. Then if all is good, I'm gonna flush it out and then put actual coolant in. I should have done this earlier before I had the engine in the car, but it doesn't really matter.
This is for you.